Just say morning.
Morning.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see all of you. I want to begin by first thanking you for what you do. As we see unfolding in Ukraine, the destruction that an authoritarian regime can have when it attacks a validly elected democracy unprovoked, you know that every day your work is to help make the world safe, our country safe, and to try to ensure that our allies have both the assurance and the tools that they need, and that policymakers get the information that they need. The discussion of what we need to do as a nation, how we need to approach our own defense and our own policy originates in the discussions that you all have from your knowledge, your background, and your experience, and I greatly appreciate that. Now, thank you for the introduction. I give you a little an expanded portfolio look at what I've got. So I sit on the Strategic Forces Subcommittee and the Air and Land Subcommittee of the Armed Services Committee. I have chaired and ranked both of them. So for Strategic Forces, as you know, it means I have nuclear weapons, missiles, missile defense, space, and military intel. 5 great reasons not to sleep at night. For Air and Land, I have everything that flies in the air and everything that rolls in the ground, and it's pretty much our acquisition subcommittee. Then I serve on the Intelligence Committee, and in that, my portfolio is the same. I continue to have, I don't know why these keep doing that. If I move them, will it help? Let's see, is that less? There you go. Great, sorry about that. So on the Intelligence Committee, I have the same portfolio, but instead of it being ours, I have everybody else's. I have, as was indicated, I serve with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and so because of that, I also have the NATO portfolio, which includes Five Eyes on the intelligence side, and so I get a really good picture of how we all fit together and how we all work together, and really our threats. So I want to do a little bit of a poll, because I want to give us some perspective that we actually do know things that we need to communicate better. And let me start with just Ukraine. How many of you believed that Russia was going to invade Ukraine before they invaded Ukraine? Right, okay, hands down. How many of you believe that China wants to invade Taiwan? Right. Okay, how many of you believe that Russia would use nuclear weapons, specifically tactical nuclear weapons, in a advancing situation from Russia, not where they're in an attack situation to the United States? Excellent. How many believe China would? How many of you believe that if Russia or China tomorrow developed a missile defense system that would prevent our nuclear weapons from being able to threaten their nation, that would no longer be a deterrent to their nation, that they would deploy it? All right. How many of you believe that the United States missile defense system is provocative? Yeah, I thought that. No hands. As you know, these are part of the policy discussions that we're having as a nation. And what I want to charge you with, and what I think is incredibly important, is we were right. And I think on all those things, we're right. And that really gives us the perspective of what is the threat? What is the threat to our country? What are we going to see in the future? And this is what we need to do a better job of. I think we do a great job of talking to each other. I think we do a great job of talking to the members of the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee. I think in the end, we do a fairly good job of talking to the Appropriations Committee, which ultimately today is going to cough up what's going to look relatively like a Republican defense bill. But ultimately, as a nation, we're not there. The reason why we have these policy decisions and these policy gaps is because so many times we're talking to each other. And I would like to charge each of you with that you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to talk outside of your community and reach a community with information and specific details to let them understand the threat. Now, we were all surprised when Ukraine fought with the level that they've been fighting. We've been seeing the words and the inspiration that has been coming out of Ukraine. And those are words and inspirations that we used to all feel ourselves was representative of our own nation. But there's a time where, because we haven't felt a threat, because we haven't felt that we have something at risk, that we've allowed our inspiration to dissipate, even though it's still being inspirational to others. Now, I have been very saddened, as you have, to watch what has unfolded in Ukraine. And what is very sad about it is so much of it was avoidable. We knew for years, those of us who were in this room who raised our hand have advocated for advanced weapon systems to be provided to Ukraine. And we saw, and of course, President Zelensky stand and say, I just wish that President Biden had not waited so long. Now they're trying to get weapon systems into Ukraine that we're seeing them make a difference. Imagine the difference they would have made from day one. Imagine the deterrent effect they would have made. Imagine if they'd had surface-to-air missile systems that were working and that were an actual threat to Russia, the calculus that Russia would have had to make differently. I was just on Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business, and she was continually trying to question this issue of what's going on with the MiGs. And I explained to her the issue is not just the MiGs. It's not just, how will a plane affect the dynamics of the fight. It's that President Zelensky is an inspirational leader, and he has called for this. And there are nations that are willing to come forward and provide these. And this is an issue of logistics, not will, except when it comes to the Biden administration. The messages that are coming out of the Biden administration are mixed, which is why you see the polls step forward and then the polls step back, because they're not being clear. Are they for providing these weapon systems or not? And how do we get this far down the path where we look all disorganized and like we can't even have a singular policy without an administration that is having an ongoing discussion at the same time that people are trying to move forward to provide a commitment? I hope that this administration will get this right. I hope that they will change the direction that they're going. I hope they will understand that once you decide that you're going to support one side, that you'll continue to support that side, and you will support it strongly. So I got two more questions for you, and I think these are the ones that are going to crystallize the inspiration we see coming out of Ukraine. How many of you believe that authoritarian regimes, at their nature, must inherently oppose and be against democratic institutions? Yeah. And how many of you believe that if you're for democratic institutions, if there's a nation that's being attacked by an authoritarian regime that's a democratic, validly elected country that's unprovoking the attack, that's our team? That's our team. Thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for making our team strong. Thank you for making our values strong. And together, we need to make certain that the message that we have gets out farther so that we can affect the discussion that we're having as a nation. Thank you.
Well spoken, sir.
Question? I see you have a croissant that's making its way.
That is actually
just
for you, sir.
Yeah.
Would you like to touch
No,
my
no,
croissant?
no, that's
sir?
okay.
Yes, sir. We've got 5 minutes for Q&A, sir.
Great.
Fire
Questions?
away.
Any questions?
Can I throw out the first one, sir?
Sure. You guys are here, but you're not awake. That's the problem.
Do you believe that Putin's saber rattling very, very early on when he saw the aid coming from the West, do you believe that has significantly impacted the willingness of some of the European NATO countries to get involved? And most importantly, what do you think Putin's end game is at the end of the day?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question about saber rattling. So I'm going to tell you a personal opinion that I think probably many of you hold. Having worked in NATO, with the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and worked with the German delegation, who seemed as anti-authoritarian regimes as every other delegation, and who seemed as strong for defense, but where I could not understand the translation of their policy beliefs to their nation's policy of investment in defense, support for other democratically elected countries, the support for Ukraine, their coziness with Russia. I actually believe that Germany was being disingenuous. I believe that they understood that everything that we understood. And what we just saw is I was wrong. They actually did not believe that Vladimir Putin would do what Vladimir Putin would do. When we all raised our hands, if this had been a German group, they would not have raised their hands. And I would have just assumed that they don't want to grip reality, but at the same time, they actually believed that Russia wouldn't do it, that by engagement, that Russia would join the international community, that they could be a strategic partner. And it is incredible to see them now say, we're going to invest. Hopefully they'll get the F-35 after having made the wrong decision previously. And they're looking at supporting Ukraine and leaning forward. I think this is a significant shift in German policy, and I think what we're going to see in Europe. And Vladimir Putin, I mean, who knows? I believe that adversaries self-select. And when an adversary self-selects and makes statements as to what their intentions are, we should believe them. And he has said over and over again. I mean, do you remember? I mean, we all got to read the audacity. He wrote an op-ed in the New York Times sometime around like 2014 where he said, you know, any nation is dangerous that believes itself exceptional. Well, maybe he should just cross out nation and put leader, because he's the one who's dangerous, right? Not us. But he has told us over and over again that his goal is to reassemble the geographical territory of the Soviet Union, and I think we should believe him.
Congressman, all the way over here in the corner.
Sir.
I should have worn my glasses.
Yes, sir. This is Jerry Hendricks. Given what Putin has said, essentially over the last 20 years, have we made, in a bipartisan way, a mistake in withdrawing all of the heavier forces that we had in Europe over essentially the last 15 years, with the last heavy armor having left, 6, 7 years ago?
You know, it's a hard one to say. We certainly had decades of where they weren't needed. And certainly, you know, the rebalancing and the demands that we had in Afghanistan and even Iraq are hard to balance against the decisions that were made. But I will commit to you a piece. Jake Tapper did an excellent piece on the decades of administrations that got Russia wrong. And he has administration after administration reaching out to Russia and believing that they could be a strategic partner. It's a great flash from the past. I would recommend all of you to get on your phones when you're having a break and just find that Jake Tapper montage, because I think everyone should see it. In fact, I texted him and said everyone should see it who has anything to do with this, because they need to understand that this is not a temporary problem. It was never a Crimea problem. It is not a Ukraine problem. Anything else? If not, I know you got other speakers. Yes, sir.
Between Russia and China today. How deep is that relationship?
Right. Excuse me. So you heard him because he got the mic, the relationship between Russia and China. Excuse me. I would say it's not as deep as Putin thought it was, and that's what's important, right? If there's anybody on this planet right now who should be really, really happy about how this has gone, it should be Taiwan, because they have seen the international community stand up. They have seen what can happen with sanctions. They have seen what can happen with advanced weaponry and people providing arms. And they can also see what a city can do as opposed to just a nation's military. But I think they're not as strong as Russia and believe that they were. Thank you.
Very short one.
That was a premature clap, sir. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
All the time.
Admiral?
I think this can be quick. So the intelligence seemed to be pretty good. We took a lot of credit for knowing what was going to happen, but I think intelligence was surprised at how it happened. So my question is, did we really see that coming, that it was going to be that slow? And should we scale that up to the entire Russian military, or is it dangerous to draw conclusions about how this is going versus how big Russia would actually do in a larger conflict?
You know, that's a very important question. On the Intelligence Committee and the Armed Services Committee, we're trying to address this. So basically, to retranslate his question, it is we knew what they wanted to do, but we didn't know what was going to happen, right? We saw their plans. We knew how they were going to deploy. We knew what they expected was going to happen inside Ukraine, and it didn't happen. Now, Russia is a country that has been having exercises for decades. They've marched themselves up and back from borders, and I would suspect that tanks don't just break down once you drive into Ukraine. And I want to know, how is it that this great, powerful military that Russia supposedly has performs so poorly and us not know? Now, the problem with that answer is that some will use the answer to be that all the things that we raised our hands for don't matter, right? Because they're a paper tiger, they're not really strong. The reality is it's the will of the leader, not just the effectiveness of the military, because he's not going to stop. So even though he has a military that's breaking down and that's going slower, he's still going to drive across that country unless he gets stopped by force. Thank you for having me.